I love long distance running, and I love walking, and I love hiking. And early in my life, since about age 17, I had chronic foot problems, I had chronic knee problems, I seemingly was constantly injured. And I loved running so much that when I was 17 years old and watched Chariots of Fire movie, I thought to myself, I really like this, I want to go to the Olympics. So I promptly poured my heart and soul into it and trained as hard as I could and ate as well as I could and read as much as I could. And unfortunately found that I wasn't achieving my goals because I was chronically broken down. So I happened to go to a road race in Washington State many years ago, and I ran into a podiatrist, and I was kind of complaining about my problems, and he said, well, geez, I'm a foot doctor, come to my practice and see the kind of work that I do. So I took him up on the offer, and I spent a month in his practice seeing what a sports podiatrist does, and I decided that that would be my career path. So I went out to Philadelphia, and I spent 4 years studying conventional podiatry, thinking that if I became a foot expert, I could help myself and I could help my clients. And when I graduated in 1995, I moved out here to Portland, and I thought at that time the two things that were going to help me take care of people's feet would be orthotic therapy and surgery. So I did a 2-year surgical residency here at the Kaiser and Legacy Health Systems hospitals, and learned a lot about how to fix bunions and hammer toes and those kinds of things, thinking that that would be the way that I would help folks most. At that time, I was also quite interested in putting people on the treadmill and watching their gait and seeing the way that they walk and run, with the idea that if I could identify the amount of pronation that they had and the type of foot type that they had, that I might be able to construct the right kind of orthotic and keep them active and keep them healthy. After many years of that, I was a little bit disappointed to find that my best efforts were not always curative. Many of those patients came back and said, this orthotic did not help me, or can we adjust it, or do you have another therapy for me to try? At that time, I remember pulling a podiatry management magazine out of my mailbox, 1999, and I opened up the magazine and I read an article that just, the title of the article caught me because it created a question in my mind. The title of the article, and we brought copies for all of you folks today. And by the way, if you enjoy this article, this author has also written 3 other articles, and we've paid copyright privileges. They're on our website, so if you guys want to have a look at this, you're more than welcome to. But the title of the article was Why Shoes Make Normal Gait Impossible. And I stared at that for a moment, and I thought to myself, this doesn't make sense to me, because I'm trained to believe that shoes are helpful, and if you get the right shoe and I can make the right orthotic, then you're going to have normal gait. So I started digging into the article, and within a few hours, I was clearly stuck in a confusing situation, because as you guys read the article, this doctor, Dr. William Rossi, who was not only a podiatrist for 35 years, he was a footwear industry consultant. He wrote, I don't know how many articles, over 1,000 articles. He wrote many books. He tried to get the podiatrist of that day to understand that footwear really wasn't the good thing that we thought it was, and that by putting more arch support into someone's footwear wasn't necessarily the path to success. What was different about Dr. Rossi is that he traveled throughout the world, and he didn't just look at feet that were in his American practice. He looked at feet that were barefoot. He looked at feet that only wore flip-flops. And essentially, overnight, after reading his information, I realized that if I were putting my clients on the treadmill and trying to determine how much pronation they had, but putting them into a shoe that wasn't even the shape of a natural foot, that didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. At the same time, I read an article that said treadmill gait is not normal gait. So I really came home that night and I was kind of confused, because I consider myself a gait expert. I was putting people on the treadmill and slowing it down and looking at pronation and thinking I was going to cure these people. Well, this doctor got me thinking that maybe 2 of the primary things I was doing in my attempt to help people were actually harming people, or not giving me the information that I needed to have. So essentially overnight, I kind of abandoned my ideology that if I could watch how much a person's foot was pronating and come up with the right amount of arch support, that somehow they were going to function better. I began embracing the ideas of Dr. Rossi, which are, if you look at the natural human shape of a baby foot, you start to think along a different line of thinking. Around the same time I read Dr. Rossi's articles, I was blessed with a daughter. Kaya Lee is her name. She was born about 8 years ago. A couple years later, I was blessed with another daughter, Lana Charlotte. And just as the article that Dr. Rossi portrays, and you'll see as you look through the information, 100% of human feet are born widest at the ends of the toes. So I went and dug out my own birth certificate, and I looked at my own footprints. Then I dug out my children's birth certificates. Then I started looking at kids' feet. And I started realizing that every single human baby that's born into the world, and except for the very few rare ones that have congenital abnormalities, are born with the toes as the widest part of the foot. I began looking at all my adult patients' feet, and I began realizing that they were no longer widest at the ends of the toes. They were widest at the ball of the foot. Not so surprisingly, I was seeing bunions, and I was seeing tailor's bunions and crooked toes. So essentially overnight, I sort of rethought my process, and I started abandoning the treadmill. I started abandoning the ideology that I could put something inside of a shoe that was not shaped like a foot and create health. At that time, I started embracing the idea that maybe if we can maintain that natural human foot shape that we have since birth, maybe we won't be breaking down quite so much in America. When I graduated, the statistic that my professional association offered was 70% of adult Americans will have a foot problem. 17 years down the road, that statistic is up to 87% of adult Americans report having a foot problem. And if you're a podiatrist that wants to build a big business and that's your ideology, rah, 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 go podiatry. But if you're like a lot of us who really want to empower people to live a healthful life, I began asking myself, how could it be that 87% of us have a body part that breaks down? At the same time, Dr. Rossi was profiling cultures throughout the world that maintain that same foot shape from birth through adulthood, having on the order of 4 to 5% adult foot problems, depending on the studies that you looked at. He looked at rickshaw pullers in Thailand that literally run miles and miles barefoot over cobblestones. You would think that these people would break down. Interestingly, as he profiled population after population that pursued that natural human foot shape since birth, we started noticing that these people didn't get all the things that I was surgically trained to fix, the bunions and the hammer toes and the nerve problems and the heel spurs, etc. So that was 1999. We're now 13 years down the road. I've been trying to get folks to think about footwear that's actually shaped like the human foot. And if you would have come to visit our practice 4 or 5 years ago, you would have been probably disappointed that there was literally 1 or 2 selections in the American retail marketplace if you wanted to have your foot shaped like a human foot. Birkenstock was one of them. Crocs was another one. So until some of the companies that we're going to talk about today came out, we would get people in Crocs, and they would run and they would walk and they would hike, and it was really rather remarkable to see a shoe that was not made for running, walking, and hiking, but was actually more shaped like a natural human foot, allowed my clients to do these activities without breaking down. So about the same time I started changing my practice philosophy, I also read a study that said 90% of all Americans wear their shoes too small. And I didn't believe that because I didn't hear that in school. So I went and bought the metal measuring devices and I started looking. So overnight I began to entertain this idea that maybe people's feet are largely healthy until they put a shoe on. And this past Christmas I was home visiting my mom and dad, and for some reason my mom decided to give me my baby shoes. And the thing that I like to show all of my clients, but parents in particular, is baby shoes are made like feet. You'll notice that the widest part of the shoe is out here at the ends of the toes, not at the ball. However, as we start examining some of the footwear today and talking about what's available out there, you'll quickly realize that almost everything is widest at the ball and correspondingly brings the toes towards the midline. Recently, a lot of the shoes out there, particularly for athletics, have lifted the toes above the support system with a feature called toe spring. So essentially, if you're an active adult American out there wanting to pursue walking, running, hiking types of activities, your foot will be positioned in that shoe in a particular fashion that is not natural and not healthful. And so I'll describe this, and as Aaron mentioned, we'll have somebody as an audience member demonstrate here in a few moments. But for years, the shoes that I was running in had my heel twice as high as the front of my foot, an inch. If you look at most running shoes out there, the heel is up an inch. For the last 13 years, running, walking, and hiking shoes, I've had toe spring upwards of 25, 35 degrees. That's the going up of the front of the foot. I don't see any shoe here today that we could use as an example of that, but if you go to any walking, running shoe store, you're going to see a shoe that's going to hold the foot in this position. And further, the ball of the foot will be the widest part of the shoe, not the ends of the toes. So when a person comes in and they're concerned about health and their foot strength and pronation, etc., I help them understand that if your foot, can everybody see this? If your foot is up higher in the heel, up in the toes, and you start to bear weight on that configuration, the body will do something that we've been conditioned to believe is a no-no or the cardinal sin, which is pronation. So what we try to get people who think they have too much pronation to understand is that if they're in a shoe with an elevated heel, toes are up in the air, toes are pinched, that shoe is going to increase that pronation. Correspondingly, I then show them that if I can help them find a shoe more like Ultra, Stem, some of these kinds of shoes where the heel is completely level with the toes spread out, if I bear weight on that foot's stable. That foot's not going to pronate. As soon as I let my toes go back into that running shoe position, I can pronate a lot. And unfortunately, when I'm doing that, my knee is pointing off over there and my foot's pointing off over here. So essentially, my belief system that I'm excited to share with you guys today is that most people really don't have a foot problem. Most people have a footwear problem. Most people don't understand that shoes aren't shaped like their foot, and when their foot breaks down, they put something inside of their shoe. What I would like to appeal to you guys today is to be thinking more along the lines of empowering your own foot. And this is what we call natural foot care.